Welcome. Today, we're diving into the world of parasites to answer one simple but really crucial question: who does what? By the end of this, you'll be able to tell the three major groups apart and know exactly what they're known for. So, let's get started. The best way to start is with a really fundamental difference: size. Can you see it or not? On one hand, we've got the microparasites. These are the invisible invaders. On the other hand, we have the macroparasites, the ones that are actually big enough to see. This simple distinction is our first and most important tool for sorting out the huge world of parasites. So what exactly is a parasite? Well, the word comes from Greek and it literally means freeloader or sponger. And that really hits the nail on the head. It's a living thing that lives on or inside a host, feeds off of it, and in the process can cause harm. It's a very one-sided relationship, let's just say that. Here's our roadmap for today. We're going to tackle each of the three main groups one by one, then bring it all together in a big comparison, and we'll finish up with a quick knowledge check to make sure it all sticks. First up, Group 1, the Protozoa. These microscopic single-celled organisms are the tiny powerhouses of the parasite world. Let's look at their profile. They're single-celled organisms, and here's the really crucial part: they multiply inside the host. This means a small infection can quickly become a huge one. You'll find them inside our cells, in our blood, or in our gut. And how do they get there? Often through contaminated food or water, or, famously, through a carrier, what we call a vector, like a mosquito. Let's make this real with three classic examples. You've probably heard of Giardia lamblia, a very common cause of traveler's diarrhea. Then there's the notorious Plasmodium, the parasite responsible for malaria, one of the most significant diseases in human history. And finally, Toxoplasma gondii, often linked to cats, which causes toxoplasmosis. Three very different organisms, all belonging to this single-celled group. So, let's wrap up the protozoa. Key takeaway: they are single-celled, they multiply inside the human body, and they're often responsible for acute, severe diseases. That's the core message for our first group. All right, let's move on to our second group and see how the picture changes. We're shifting from the microscopic to the macroscopic with Group 2, the Helminths, also known as the multicellular worms. Now, this is a direct contrast to the protozoa. Helminths are complex, multicellular animals. A major difference is that they generally do not multiply in humans. So the severity of the disease depends on the number of worms you were initially exposed to. We can break them down into three main categories: roundworms, tapeworms, and flukes. Clinically, they often cause chronic, long-term infections and trigger a specific immune response that you can see in a blood test as eosinophilia, which is just a rise in a certain type of white blood cell. For examples, we have the well-known roundworm, Ascaris, which can cause stomach and gut problems. Then there's the beef tapeworm, Tinea saginata, which can grow incredibly long, but, surprisingly, often causes no symptoms at all. And finally, schistosoma, a type of fluke that lives in blood vessels and causes the serious tropical disease schistosomiasis. So what's the most important message about helminths? They are multicellular worms, they typically don't multiply inside the body, they lead to chronic infections that depend on the worm load, and they trigger that characteristic immune response with elevated eosinophils. For our last category, we're moving from inside the body to the outside. Let's take a look at Group 3. The ectoparasites are external pests. These are the creatures that live on us, not in us. We're talking about arthropods here, so insects and arachnids like ticks and mites. Their direct effect is often a local irritation, like itching and rashes. But their biggest medical importance? Their role as vectors. They are the delivery vehicles for a whole range of other pathogens, including bacteria, viruses, and even other parasites. I think everyone knows these examples. We've got lice that live in our hair. There are mites, specifically the scabies mite that burrows into the skin and causes the intensely itchy condition of scabies. And of course, ticks, which are notorious not so much for their bite, but for the diseases they can transmit, like Lyme disease and tick-borne encephalitis. So, the core message for ectoparasites is all about their location. They live on the host. They cause local skin reactions, but their primary medical significance often lies in their role as vectors for other diseases. Okay, time for the synthesis. Let's put all three groups side by side and look at the patterns in the big comparison. This is where it all comes together. This table lays it all out nice and clearly. Let's just walk through the rows. Size: a clean split. Microscopic versus macroscopic. Location, a simple inside versus outside story. Course of disease. Now this is a fantastic clinical clue, often acute and dramatic with protozoa versus chronic and slow building with worms. And all this influences the diagnosis. For microscopic protozoa, we need microscopes or molecular tests like PCR that look for the parasite's DNA. For worms, we're often looking for eggs and stool samples. And for ectoparasites, we can usually just see them with our own eyes. All right, time to put your new knowledge to the test. Let's see if you can solve a few mini cases. Here are 3 scenarios. For each one, think about which parasite group is the most likely culprit. First, a traveler with recurring bouts of fever. Second, someone with intense itching between their fingers. And third, a patient with long-term gut problems and that specific finding in their blood work. Which group is which? So, how did you do? Let's check the answers. The recurring fevers after a trip just screams malaria, which is caused by the protozoan Plasmodium. That intense, localized itching, a classic sign of scabies, caused by an ectoparasitic mite. And the chronic gut issues combined with high eosinophils, that is the signature of a helminth, a worm infection. See how the patterns work? So let's boil it all down. If you only remember 3 things, make it these. Protozoa, single-celled, inside the body, often cause acute disease. Helminths, multicellular worms causing chronic diseases. And ectoparasites live on the outside of the body and are notorious vectors. And that brings us not just to what we know, but what we need to think about next. As the planet warms, the habitats for vectors like mosquitoes and ticks are expanding. This raises a critical question for the future. How will climate change redraw the map of parasitic diseases? Something to think about. Thanks for watching.